The Draconian warships exploded. Shattered hulls spun through the void, venting flames and debris. Commander Orion watched in disbelief as the UES Intrepid emerged unscathed from his failed ambush. It was the year 2257. The Intrepid, Earth's most advanced warship, had been dispatched on a crucial diplomatic mission to the Draconian Imperium. Relations were tense between the two spacefaring powers. Many Draconians resented humanity's wealth and success. But Commander Orion's bitter hatred had driven him to open fire on the human vessel without provocation. Captain George Shaw stood on the Intrepid's bridge, surveying the destruction. Orion had severely underestimated human defensive capabilities. The Intrepid's shields had easily absorbed the Draconian weapons fire. Shaw had swiftly launched a surgical counterattack, disabling the enemy fleet with targeted EMP bursts and precision laser strikes. Not a single Draconian life had been lost, but their ships now drifted helplessly, and their commander's shame was total. As Shaw hailed the Draconian flagship to demand answers, he knew this incident was only the beginning. Orion's unsanctioned attack had laid bare the seething resentments within Draconian society. Wealthy elites prospered, while the masses struggled in poverty. Many blamed humans for their plight. The fragile trade relationship between Earth and the Imperium now hung by a thread. The Intrepid's mission had never been more vital or more dangerous. As the human warship forged onward into Draconian space, every crew member knew the risks. At any moment, they could face another attack driven by fanatic hatred. Success might avert an apocalyptic war between spacefaring civilizations, but failure could doom both species to an eternity of blood and fire. Zax clung to his restraints as the Draconian transport jolted and shuddered. Acrid smoke stung his nostrils, seeping from the craft's battered hull. He tasted blood, warm and coppery on his tongue. Zax's head pounded, thoughts sluggish and disjointed. The attack on the human ship had been a disaster. Commander Orion's arrogance and blind hatred had led them into a humiliating defeat. Around him, the other Draconian survivors murmured and cursed, nursing their wounds. They were soldiers, but also farmers, laborers, the destitute, those with no other choice but to serve in the Imperium's fleets. Expendable pawns, thrown against the humans' superior technology. Zax looked down at his trembling hands, still seeing the flash of human weapons, the blossoms of flame as Draconian ships burst apart. He had fired his own lasers, sent bolts of superheated plasma streaking toward the UES Intrepid. And for what? On the Intrepid's medical deck, Lena gritted her teeth as the bone knitter hummed and clacked, realigning her shattered radius. The concussion made her head swim, pounding in time with the machine. But through the pain, a question plagued her. Why? Why had the Draconians attacked without warning or reason? She had studied their culture, learned their language, admired the artistry of their scaled architecture and sinuous sculptures. Lena refused to believe an entire species was inherently treacherous or warlike. There had to be an explanation. The Imperium's capital sprawled across the horizon, a vast metropolis of twisting spires and arching sky bridges. As the Intrepid descended toward the city's heart, Captain Shaw stood aboard the bridge, eyebrows furrowed with tension. He knew the Draconian leadership would be seething with outrage and humiliation over the incident. They would seek any pretext to place the blame on human aggression. Shaw needed to tread carefully, to frame the talks around cooperation and common interests, while making clear that Earth would not tolerate unprovoked violence. It was a delicate balance, with billions of lives spanning parsecs hanging in that precarious equilibrium. Zax marched through the gleaming halls of the Draconian Apex Chamber, pulse rifle gripped tight. He had been selected as part of the security detachment for the negotiations, an honor for a low-born soldier, or so his superiors claimed. As he passed a shadowed alcove, whispered voices caught his attention. "Buck, the humans suspect nothing. When their delegation arrives, we'll be ready." In the staged attack, the sacrificed ships, necessary losses. The Imperium needs this war. The elites grow restless, eager for new plunder and slaves. The masses are desperate, angry. We must give them an enemy to unite against. Zax froze, not daring to breathe. The treachery and callousness in those hushed words chilled him to his core. He thought of the wasted Draconian lives, the carefully engineered hatred, all to line the elite's already swollen coffers. A cold knot of outrage ignited in his gut. In the soaring chambers of the Apex, Lena stood behind Captain Shaw, still favoring her tender arm. She studied the Draconian officials, their jeweled robes and haughty postures, sensing the disdain and hostility radiating beneath the veneer of diplomacy. As the talks adjourned for a recess, Lena noticed a young Draconian soldier watching her, his opalescent eyes troubled. Fighting her instinctive distrust, she approached him. "You know this is wrong, don't you?" Lena murmured. "The attack, the hatred they're stoking between our peoples. There's something rotten here." Zax hesitated, glancing around furtively, but something in the human's earnest gaze compelled him to answer. "Yes," he admitted in halting English. "I overheard plans. The elites, they want war. They think it will help them." "Help them exploit your people," Lena finished grimly, "while we tear each other apart." Zax nodded, feeling a giddy rush of terror and exhilaration. He was committing treason with an alien enemy, but it felt strangely right. "My name is Zax." "I'm Lena. Listen, Zax, whatever's going on here, whatever they're planning, we have to stop it. Our peoples don't have to be enemies." In that moment of quiet accord, a glimmer of fragile hope kindled between human and Draconian. Two individuals reaching across the yawning void. But the gulf remained vast, and the forces conspiring to shatter that tenuous connection were already in motion. Zax and Lena both knew any trust between them could be snuffed out in an instant. Yet they had to try, because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Zax's scaled fingers trembled as he pressed the communicator against his ear slit, straining to catch every word. The voices of Draconian officials echoed through the device, each syllable dripping with malice. "The human trade ships won't know what hit them," one voice sneered. "Our operatives are in place. When the explosions start, they'll blame their own incompetence." "And Marcus Reeves?" another questioned. "Can we trust the human?" "He's been most cooperative. His information on Earth's defenses is invaluable." Zax's heart raced. He glanced around the darkened corridor, praying no one had noticed his eavesdropping. The weight of what he'd learned pressed down on him like a neutron star. Meanwhile, aboard the Intrepid, Lena's fingers flew across the holographic interface. Encrypted Draconian transmissions scrolled past her eyes, each one more damning than the last. A name caught her attention. Marcus Reeves. She inhaled sharply. He was one of their own diplomats. "Captain Shaw," she called out, "we have a serious problem." Hours later, Zax slipped through the shadows of a decrepit warehouse on the outskirts of the capital. His pulse quickened as he spotted Lena waiting in a pool of dim light. Her eyes widened as he approached. "Zax," she breathed, "what did you find out?" He opened his mouth to respond when a plasma bolt sizzled past his head. Draconian soldiers poured into the warehouse, weapons raised. "Traitors!" their leader bellowed. "Surrender now!" Lena's hand flew to her hip, drawing a sleek human sidearm. Zax hefted his pulse rifle. Back to back, they faced the encircling troops. "Any ideas?" Zax muttered. Lena's only response was to squeeze the trigger. Her weapon emitted a high-pitched whine, and suddenly the warehouse was plunged into darkness. Zax felt her hand grasp his arm, pulling him towards an exit he couldn't see. They sprinted through the night, the shouts of confused soldiers fading behind them. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Lena turned to Zax. "We can't trust anyone now. Not your people, not mine." Zax nodded grimly. "Then what's our next move?" Lena's eyes glinted with commitment. "We go after Marcus Reeves." The trap was set. Zax and Lena crouched behind a rocky outcropping on a desolate moon, watching as a shuttle touched down nearby. A lone figure emerged, Marcus Reeves, his expensive suit out of place in the barren landscape. Lena's voice crackled through Zax's earpiece. "Remember, we need him alive." Zax grunted in acknowledgement, his grip tightening on his weapon. As Reeves approached their position, Zax and Lena sprung their ambush. "Don't move!" Lena shouted, her weapon trained on Reeves's chest. The diplomat froze, his face a mask of shock and fear. "What is the meaning of this?" Zax stepped forward, his scales gleaming in the harsh sunlight. "We know about your collaboration with the Draconian elites. We know about the planned attacks." Reeves' composure cracked. His eyes darted between them, searching for an escape. Finding none, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "You don't understand," he whispered. "They threatened my family. I had no choice." Lena's voice was cold. "You always have a choice. Now you have another one. Help us stop this conspiracy or spend the rest of your life in a cell." Tears welled in Reeves's eyes as the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. He nodded weakly. "What do you need to know?" As Reeves spilled his secrets, Zax and Lena exchanged a glance. They had the information they needed, but the real challenge lay ahead. Somehow, they would have to infiltrate the heart of Draconian power and expose the truth before it was too late. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, and time was running out. Zax's heart pounded as he and Lena crouched in the shadows near the secret entrance to the Draconian elite's base. The information extracted from Marcus Reeves had led them here, to this nondescript maintenance hatch nestled among twisted metal struts. Lena tapped a series of commands into her wrist computer, bypassing the security protocols. The hatch slid open with a soft hiss. They exchanged a wordless glance before slipping inside. The corridors were a maze of sleek metal and pulsing energy conduits. Zax's scales prickled with each distant footstep or echoing voice. He gripped his pulse rifle tighter, every sense on high alert. "Security patrol," Lena whispered, pulling Zax into an alcove. They held their breath as two armored Draconians marched past, mere centimeters away. When the coast was clear, they continued their careful advance. After what felt like hours of nerve-wracking stealth, they reached their target, a cavernous room filled with rows of computer terminals. Holographic displays flickered with streams of data, the conspiracy laid bare in cold, hard facts. Lena's fingers flew across a nearby console. "Downloading now. This is everything we need to expose them." A shrill alarm cut through the air. Zax's blood ran cold. "We've been detected," he snarled. The door at the far end of the room burst open. Elite Draconian soldiers poured in, weapons raised. "Intruders! Open fire!" Plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Zax dove for cover behind a bank of servers, returning fire with precise bursts from his rifle. Lena crouched nearby, her human sidearm spitting deadly energy pulses. "Download complete," Lena shouted over the chaos. "We need to move." They fought their way out of the control room, Zax's military training melding seamlessly with Lena's advanced weaponry. Corridor after corridor became a gauntlet of laser fire and close-quarters combat. A lucky shot grazed Zax's shoulder, leaving a trail of seared scales. He hissed in pain but pressed on, driven by the urgency of their mission. They burst into the main operations room, a vast chamber dominated by a holographic tactical display. The conspiracy's ringleaders stood frozen in shock, caught in the act of coordinating their war-provoking plot. "It's over," Lena declared, her voice steady despite her ragged breathing. "We have the evidence. Your treachery will be exposed to both our peoples." The lead conspirator, a Draconian adorned with ornate cybernetic implants, sneered. "You think you've won? Kill them!" Loyal soldiers materialized from hidden alcoves, surrounding Zax and Lena. The air crackled with building energy as weapons powered up on all sides. Just as Zax prepared for what seemed like a hopeless last stand, the far wall exploded inward. Through the breach strode Captain Shaw, flanked by a squad of heavily armed intrepid Marines. "Lower your weapons," Shaw's voice boomed. "By the authority of Earth and in the name of peace, you are all under arrest." The firefight that followed was brief but intense. Zax and Lena fought alongside the human Marines, their unlikely alliance a living example of what could be achieved through cooperation. When the smoke cleared, the ringleaders stood defeated. Some dropped their weapons in surrender, while others, overcome by shame, turned their weapons on themselves in a final act of defiance. Zax limped to a central console, his injuries forgotten as adrenaline surged through him. With trembling claws, he extracted a glowing data core. "Here," he said, presenting it to Captain Shaw. "Everything we need to bring the true criminals to justice." Shaw nodded grimly. "Well done, both of you. This evidence will be shared with the Draconian High Command. They'll face a fair trial for their actions." As the Marines secured the prisoners, Lena approached Zax. Her eyes shone with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "We did it," she said softly. Zax let out a long breath, feeling the weight of their ordeal. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. There's still so much work to do." Outside, the first rays of the system's twin suns crept over the horizon. A new day was dawning, one that held the promise of a different future for humans and Draconians alike. Zax's claws tightened around the glowing data core as he and Lena sprinted through the Intrepid's corridors. The ship trembled under their feet, aftershocks from the recent battle still reverberating through its hull. "Captain Shaw!" Lena called out as they burst onto the bridge. "We have it!" Shaw's eyes locked onto the pulsing device in Zax's grip. He nodded grimly, then turned to his communications officer. "Open a secure channel to the Draconian High Command. Priority Alpha." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of High Commander Vexthor. His scales rippled with barely held-back fury as Shaw relayed the situation. "This evidence must be verified immediately," Vexthor growled. "I propose an emergency summit on Meridian Prime. Neutral ground." "Agreed," Shaw replied. "We'll transmit the coordinates." As preparations for the summit began, Zax felt a growing unease. He paced the length of his quarters, unable to shake the feeling that this victory had come too easily. His suspicions proved prophetic. Alarms blared throughout the ship, jolting Zax from his restless thoughts. He rushed to the bridge, nearly colliding with Lena in the process. "Multiple Draconian signatures on approach," the tactical officer reported. "They're not responding to hails and weapons are hot." Shaw's face hardened. "Mutineers," he spat. "Loyal to the exposed elites, no doubt. All hands to battle stations." The Intrepid shuddered as the first volley of enemy fire struck its shields. Through the view screen, Zax watched in horror as sleek human ships engaged the bulky Draconian craft. Explosions bloomed in the void, silent testament to lives snuffed out in an instant. "We need to get to the summit," Lena shouted over the din of battle. "It's our only chance to end this." Shaw nodded grimly. "Helm, plot a course for Meridian Prime. Engineering, give us everything you've got." The Intrepid surged forward, its small escort fleet forming a protective wedge around the flagship. Enemy fire lanced through space, scoring hits that sent tremors through the deck plating. Zax gripped a nearby console, steadying himself as the ship bucked and weaved. His heart raced, torn between fear for his own life and an aching sorrow for his misguided kin. As they neared Meridian's orbit, Zax's communicator crackled to life. His eyes widened as he listened to the incoming transmission. "Captain," he called out, "Loyalist forces are rallying to the High Command. Reinforcements are incoming." True to his words, space rippled as Draconian warships materialized around them. The tide of battle shifted in an instant, the mutineers caught in a devastating crossfire between human and Loyalist fleets. The Intrepid touched down on Meridian Prime amid the chaos of the space battle above. Zax and Lena raced through the fortified summit complex, flanked by a mixed guard of human Marines and Draconian warriors. They burst into the Grand Assembly Hall where representatives from both species waited in tense silence. Zax's claws shook as he connected the data core to the central holographic display. "What you are about to see," Lena began, her voice steady despite her ragged breathing, "will change everything." The holograms flickered to life, filling the chamber with damning evidence. Coded transmissions, financial records, and clandestine meetings played out before the stunned audience. Gasps and angry mutters rippled through the crowd as respected high command figures were implicated in the conspiracy. "This cannot be," one Draconian official bellowed, rising to his feet. These are lies. The data speaks for itself, Zax replied, his voice low but firm. Our people deserve better than this corruption. As the gravity of the situation sank in, the mood in the chamber shifted. The accused were swiftly detained, their protests falling on deaf ears. To Zax's amazement, the head of the High Command himself stood up, his scales dulled with shame. I have failed our people, he intoned. The time has come for new leadership, for a new era of transparency and equality. In the days that followed, the Draconian Imperium underwent a seismic shift. Renegade warlords were imprisoned, and sweeping reforms dismantled the pillars of the old regime. Zax found himself thrust into the spotlight alongside Lena, hailed as heroes by many. Yet as they stood on a balcony overlooking the reconstruction efforts on the Draconian homeworld, Zax felt the weight of all that had been lost. The Intrepid's crew had paid a heavy price in the final battle, their sacrifice etched into his memory. Lena's hand found his, her warmth a stark contrast to his cool scales. We did it, Zax, she said softly. We made a difference. Zax nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The first step had been taken, but the journey towards lasting peace between their peoples had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.